Good morning, viewers. Today we are having a program on challenges to peace in times of war on terror. ये FHS का एक प्रोग्राम है और आतंक के खिलाफ जो जंग है उसी टाइम इन दिनों में शांति की क्या सब चांसेस ऑफ हैविंग ए बेटर वर्ल्ड, पीसफुल वर्ल्ड है, इसके बारे में आज चर्चा करेंगे। आज सिर्फ मैं ही कुछ इस बारे में अपना मंतव्य रखूंगा और इसके बाद हम देखेंगे जब कुछ क्वेश्चंस, कमेंट्स या सवाल कुछ आते हैं तो हम उसका जवाब देने के लिए कोशिश करेंगे। तो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल लेट मी टेक अप द बेसिक्स। नाउ फियर एंड टेरर आर दीज टू वर्ड्स। ये दोनों का मीनिंग में क्या फर्क है ये जानना जरूरी है। अब देखिए, फियर का मतलब होता है भय या कोई चीज किसको पनिश करने की हो तो इनके अंदर भय जन्माना को कहते हैं फियर। फियर बेसिकली देयरफॉर इज लोकल, जहां पर ये अप्लाई होता है वहीं पर सीमित रहता है। टेरर जो है मगर कोई दूसरी चीज है, ये भय जात करता है, बट टेरर जो है एक छोटा सा इंसिडेंट से बहुत व्याप्त भय पैदा करता है। जैसे कि पॉपुलर इंसिडेंट है कि भाई कोई ग्रेनेड फेंक देता है या कोई बम फेंकते हैं, तो इंसिडेंट जहां पर वहीं पर सीमित नहीं रहता है, सडनली इट गेट्स स्प्रेड आउट। तो वो मैसेज जो है हर एक के पास पहुंच जाता है, मगर भय के साथ ये नहीं है। सो लोकल और फियर और टेरर के बीच में ये सबसे बड़ी फर्क है कि फियर इज लोकल और इंसिडेंट स्पेसिफिक, जो इंसिडेंट में ये अप्लाइड है वहां तक सीमित रहता है। बट टेरर इज क्रिएशन ऑफ फियर ऑन इन ए वाइडर कम्युनिटी। फॉर इंस्टांस, आज जो हम डिस्कस करने जा रहे हैं वार ऑन टेरर, देयर वाज ए टेरर वाज ये सितंबर 11 को जो न्यूयॉर्क का ट्विन टावर्स के ऊपर अलकायदा ने बम्बार्ड किया था, उसके बाद एक टेररिज्म स्प्रेड कर गया ऑल ओवर द वर्ल्ड। वो फियर नहीं है, वो टेररिज्म है। इसके बाद हम थोड़ा सा जानना कोशिश करेंगे। नाउ इट हैज बिकम वेरी पॉपुलर, द फ्रेज इज वार ऑन टेरर। ये कहां से आया है और इसका मतलब क्या है? देखिए, वार ऑन टेरर वर्ड जो है पहले तो था नहीं, इट वाज नॉट देयर बिफोर सितंबर 11 एटलीस्ट। देयरफॉर वार ऑन टेरर का मतलब, क्योंकि ये फॉलोइंग द सितंबर 11 है, इट रिप्रेजेंट्स अ सेट ऑफ रेस्पॉन्सेस विच द अमेरिकन गवर्नमेंट एंड इट्स, जिसको कहते हैं कि द कोalition of the willing, you know, there is a group of countries, developed countries mostly, the NATO countries mostly, whose leader is USA. They have devised some set of responses against the terrorism, and those responses are popularly known or described as war on terror. अदरवाइज टेरर का जो मतलब है इट्स वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग। टेरर तो आजकल हम कहते हैं कि दोज हु डू थिंग्स अगेंस्ट द स्टेट आर नोन एज टेररिस्ट्स। इट्स वेरी पॉपुलर डेफिनेशन, बट द ओरिजिन ऑफ द वर्ड टेरर लाइज एल्सवेयर। फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन में जब थर्मिडर स्टेज आता है, जो टुवर्ड्स द एंड, और रोबेस्पियर का जो एक सरकार है, गवर्नमेंट है, स्टेट है, वो इतना टेररिज्म फैला दिया था कि द वर्ड टेरर एक्चुअली टेक्स इट्स बर्थ फ्रॉम ऑल दोज मेजर्स which the state used to take in order to frighten people. So terrorism was coined as an expression for the state measures to frighten people, to intimidate people, so that they don't oppose the state. But over the years, thanks mostly to the scholars and the pandits, they have used that word, taken that word from the state and used it, just giving it the reverse meaning, the opposite meaning. So पहले state terrorization कर रहा था, therefore terrorism was born. The word terrorism takes its birth from the acts of intimidation and terrorization by of the state. But now हम उनको terrorist कहते हैं जो कि state के खिलाफ कोई act करता है. So it is just the opposite. What the origin of the word goes back to the French Revolution days, where states' acts of intimidation and repression and frightening, they used to be called terrorism. But now the word use has been reversed. All those who do anything against the state are called terrorists. So Al-Qaeda are terrorists because they attacked on the sovereignty of the American state. So it is how we have seen the word terrorism has been sort of reversed in its meaning that it conveys, it conveyed originally. So that is an important point that I would like you should take note of. Now, when we discuss again war on terror, ये measures सिर्फ not confined to weapons, that is tools and techniques used for launching a warfare. It can have many other measures other than military. For instance, it can have economic sanctions, it can have preventive measures, so many diplomatic sanctions. So all these things go into the package called war on terror. Now this actually package is going to it just completed 5 years of rule on September 11, 2006. Now when we try to discuss how strong are the chances of peace in this world, there are so many ways of answering this question, but probably a very comprehensive answer can be possible by answering what is happening to the role of US during these days, or in other words, how is USA behaving or making possible chances of peace in the world. As you all know, after the Second World War, there was UNO, United Nations Organization, and the Security Council is such UN body, the premier UN executive body, which was vested with the responsibility of preventing war and promoting peace. Now, how do you prevent war? Among other things, you will agree that at least there should be some slowdown, if not total elimination, there should be some slowdown in the production of weapons. But if we go by the figures of weapons production in the world today, the truth is 91% of the total weapons trade in the world belongs to those countries who occupy the 5 permanent positions or power. They are known as the 5 permanent powers of the Security Council. Responsibility is given to them to prevent war, but they are producing all put together, of course 91% all put together, 51% alone is produced by USA. So the leading power of the Security Council is also the leading producer of the weapons. Now you may ask the question, why should somebody produce weapons unless there is a market? But where is the market? And what is a market for weapons? Warfare. So you have to also promote warfare. Of course, people will not call you a leader if you directly, openly promote warfare. So your strategy becomes, foreign policy options, strategies become, one of really promoting warfare so that the weapons get sold. And if you look at these economies of the 5 permanent powers of the Security Council, the weapons figure to the tune of 5% of their GDP's weapons are figuring in their economies. So you take away weapons, the world becomes peaceful, but probably the economies of these 5 permanent powers will be significantly damaged. So what they are supposed to do? That leads to a sort of a hypocritical stand, which popularly in terms of a phrase it is known as running with the hare and hunting with the hound, or you can say preach peace and profess war. दूसरों के लिए शांति का प्रचार करो, मगर जब करने अपने को करने के लिए हो वो वेपन्स या वार का प्रमोट करो. Now ये जो hypocrisy, this hypocrisy sort of centrally characterizes most of the things of efforts at maintaining of peace in the world. Take yesterday's incident. कल जो है, the 8th country, that is North Korea, tested its bomb. Now anybody can ask, well, if North Korea has tested its bomb, there is a nuclear test of North Korea, how does USA figure in that? I'll tell you how. You see, in India it may be a little inconvenient to argue or condemn North Korea's nuclear test, though our government has very strongly condemned this nuclear test, because there is something called Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. So a member of the NPT is under a ban for nuclear tests. So they don't indulge in nuclear tests. But most of the powerful countries in the world, again part of that hypocrisy as I was saying, are not signatories of NPT. On this specious logic or ground that their nuclear tests or nuclear energy, their investments in the nuclear production are mostly geared towards peaceful purposes. For instance, we call our US-India nuclear deal as a commerce, as a nuclear commerce. This type of nuclear deal collaboration, despite the fact that India is not a signatory of NPT, this type of fact, this will lead towards peace. It will make peace possible through making economic and commerce boom, that is to making economic and trade developments possible. The logic being that if you go by the nuclear civil technologies, then they can bring about a quantum jump in the economic development. And that quantum jump in economic development will be a surer, guaranteed source of maintaining peace in the country. But the question is, what happens when another country, that like North Korea, which was a member of the NPT, withdrew from NPT recently and went for nuclear test? Now, not a good thing at all for peace in the world. Any nuclear proliferation will lead to chances of peace getting reduced. Now, this also is very interesting to find out why North Korea went to this extent. To the extent probably that China, the most trusted ally of North Korea, opposing what North Korea did yesterday. Now, if you look at the history of this particular nuclear test that North Korea has did yesterday, it's interesting. You see, earlier when it was a member of the NPT, it decided to come out of it in 93, but again withdrew that, suspended that withdrawal from NPT when USA promised to have nuclear cooperation with North Korea. Now, this East Asia region, if you look at, you have very powerful countries in this region: Japan, China, South Korea. And again, if you go to the Asian continent, India is a major force here. Now, the question is, we need to have nuclear peace in this region. Japan and South Korea have dropped their nuclear option because USA, Washington has promised them that security against, not North Korea at that time, because North Korea is not a force at that time, against a potential attack from Russia or China. So virtually, Japan, South Korea's nuclear peace means there is the presence of a nuclear America there in that region. Now, when USA wanted a cooperation with North Korea, it went off well. It was good as long as it lasted. But suddenly, we found there was a very big change. Remember, following September 11, of course. Remember, what happened is there is a word called the blaster from President Bush, axis of evil. Now, axis of evil, the world has an axis of evil. Now, who are these? Which countries constitute this axis is very interesting to note as of today, after North Korea has gone for nuclear tests. Now, the axis of evil, when President Bush has identified, it means this axis has to be destroyed, otherwise the civilization within quotes is in danger. That was the word from his own Vice President Dick Cheney. Now, this axis comprises three countries: Iraq, Iran, and North Korea. So, this type of international isolation and the response that America had forged in the wake of 9/11, as it popularly known as, though it is actually 11/9, these responses against Iraq, it first went, it entered Afghanistan, overthrew Taliban, then it invaded Iraq, where the prospects of peace are still evading, they are nowhere seen, and North Korea was one after that blaster, because Iran is one such. This ding-dong battle is still going on, diplomatic battle, of course, whether Iran should go for a nuclear facility or not. But in the meanwhile, the third one, that is North Korea, has already gone for the nuclear test. Now, if it provokes, it must provoke when the most powerful country has identified them as the axis of evil, then what should be the response? You see, the responses can be very frightening. It can go to any extent, but it has to also prevent the nuclear flashpoints. The nuclear flashpoints are there in many areas of the world. We have one here, Indo-Pak. It's now there because, as I said, the American nuclear presence is there in Japan and South Korea, but now North Korea has proved to be a nuclear power. Now all these are creating problems for peace in the world. It has been explained by a professor of international relations, Richard Hofstadter, that he says that this particular style of doing international politics, especially of Bush administration, he says, because war on terror is an expression only confined to the Bush administration, this second Bush, this junior Bush. Now he says that it is mainly due to a paranoid, that is his word, paranoid style of doing politics. Now what is paranoid style of doing politics? Paranoid style of doing politics has three implications. One is you get heated up in a very inflated sense, not logically. There can be a normal provocation, but abnormally you get heated up when there is some provocation. And the other one is immediately you see there is a bug under the rug, that is a conspiracy somewhere around. Some people are definitely probably conspiring against you, against your regime, against your rule, or against your country. In other words, your failures are to be passed on to somebody who is there already, your enemy or your detractors. And these are usually done through a very interesting philosophical principle of absolute good versus absolute evil. It means we are so good, we are absolutely good, and therefore anybody who is opposed to us are absolutely evil, and they therefore need to be destroyed out of the earth. Now this absolutist conception of one is absolutely good, the other is absolutely evil, makes the principle of coexistence, makes the principle of humanity a very doubtful one. Because if you do not believe that other countries, other sovereign states, according to the UN Charter, are equal. All the sovereign states, whether it is America, Bangladesh, India, they being sovereign states, they enjoy equality of treatment. But that is not going to be the case actually. Because the balance of power, those days, I mean, this is what they call the Cold War politics. In the days of Cold War politics, this equality of states meant there was a balance of power. So each state tried to build its own strength, national strength, and to be respected as an equally important state in the Committee of Nations. But now they say that, I mean, this is the latest Washington philosophy, this equality is no more required. The world needs to be now rid of all the evils. That is, again, make the world rid of evils is the word again from the President Bush in his post September 11 speech. Now, who are the evils? The evils are those countries, as his secretary only recently put it, Condoleezza Rice, in a very famous article in Washington Post called Promise of Democratic Peace. Now, in that article, she says that those countries which are promoting, general ethos type of situations, like for instance, when you say that you are culturally relative, situations of cultural determinism, you will call it. For instance, Asian values, Latino culture, African tribalism, Slavic despotism. You see, these are all specific cultural traits, general cultural traits. Now, those countries, according to Ms. Condoleezza Rice, the Secretary of State, Bush administration Secretary of State. Those countries which are promoting this type of philosophies, they don't deserve to be there, because, I mean, I am quoting her, sovereignty is a luxury for these type of countries which suffer from, she says, freedom deficits. That is, all people do not have equal right in participation of the governance, freedom deficit. And this space is occupied by very general, abstract philosophies, and it is this precisely the situation where freedom is absent and general philosophies are flourishing. That is the situation where terrorism breeds. So those countries which favor these type of philosophies, for them sovereignty is a luxury, and that sovereignty needs to be drained out. Obviously those countries don't deserve to remain sovereign, and you can easily enter inside and take away, bring about what they call regime changes. Accordingly, the policy also sets have been evolved. Policy sets have been broadly two. I mean, there are two major strands in these policy sets that would make sure that the world becomes free from terrorism as it clears those countries now ridden with philosophies and suffering from freedom deficits. On some queries, India and China probably do not suffer from freedom deficits, but Russia does. I mean, this is about Condoleezza Rice's article on promising democratic peace. Her deputy, Mr. Burns, he takes up the matter and sort of enunciates the policy objectives which would probably fulfill or make it possible that these stated goals are fulfilled. And the policy objectives find two strands. One is what he calls transatlantic partnership, and the second is the regime change. Now, when it refers to transatlantic partnership, what Mr. Burns refers to is again a particular understanding, namely that Soviet Union is now gone, communism is over, and as Francis Fukuyama said at one point of time, though later on he changed it, that liberal democracy is now the only ideal for the world to aspire for. There are no other ideologies available, though this stand didn't last longer. So in that sort of setup, what has happened according to Mr. Burns is Soviet Union is gone, has disappeared, and Europe has closed its own gaps. So what Europe and Soviet Union were doing in the past, namely they were trying to resolve their own internal problems, that phase is now over. They should now look outside. Now outside of Europe they should look, now where? They should look to Middle East, they should look to Asia. Now they are the areas they should look along with USA. So this transatlantic alliance means that NATO is going to be strengthened for this purpose, and USA and European Union countries will together see to it that other countries are made to follow in line in terms of this what you call this free from terrorism. So NATO will be the handmaiden for this purpose. It will be the instrument for this purpose. Now, wherever there are objections, wherever there will be resistance, what do? That is the second objective. They will bring about a regime change. Now, this forcibly overthrowing the governments, I mean, in simpler words, it only means any government which doesn't follow this line of opting for freedom and giving by to the terrorism, destroying terrorist sources of terrorism, that government doesn't deserve to last, and therefore it can be overthrown. As Professor Francis Fukuyama says, this type of preemption was not new. It was there before also in American foreign policy. But what is new to this strategy is this focus has been shifted from preemption to prevention. So, you see, when ideologically you get motivated to prevent a particular country to pursue a particular line, that is new, and that preventive measure, those preventive measures can be possible only through regime changes, and regime changes are possible if a government resists, a native government resists because of cultural reasons, because of their own tribalism, because of their own values, because of whatever. If they resist, then there is the NATO or the transatlantic partnership will work with all its physical force there. So this is the scenario that they have depicted. Madam Rice has depicted, and Mr. Burns has elaborated on that. And this is going to be the scenario for the coming, I mean, as they say, it's for the 21st century, but that is how a new era is going to dawn. And as Madam Condoleezza Rice also says, it's very important that what Dean Acheson, soon after the Second World War, the story is as follows. Soon after the Second World War, President Truman and Dean Acheson, Secretary of State, they decided that there should be a world free of scourge of war, and there should be more focus on freedom. But soon after this enunciation of this policy, they found themselves enmeshed in something called Cold War rivalry, because there was communism coming up again, and between this Soviet, US-led camp and Soviet camp, the Cold War continued till Soviet Union was destroyed and disbanded. But now Condoleezza Rice says a similar situation has arisen, and we must make sure that the world is made again safe for freedom, which by implication means countries which are nurturing the abstract philosophies, abstract cultural determinisms, they should be taught a lesson, and if they don't fall in line, then there can be always this NATO partnership, the transatlantic partnership, which can come with its physical force to get it done. Now, if these are the options or these are the responses which have been diplomatically designed in order to make world peaceful, in order to make world free from terror, then the question is very simple. It is not peace as the world wants, it is the peace as USA wants. Actually, we are living through the days of globalization, and none other than Henry Kissinger has very suggestively titled one of his lectures at the turn of the 20th century, 99 October 12. Now, he titled that lecture which he gave to the Trinity College, Dublin. The title of the lecture speaks for itself. The basic challenge is, this is the title of the lecture, the basic challenge is that what is called globalization is really another name for the dominant role of the United States. So if you say that globalization is in full fury all over the world, it only means that USA's dominance is fully in, USA is in full hold of the global world, of the world. The world is under its capture, under its spell. Now, it is for everybody to think all over the world. If USA is having the entire globe under its economic domination or political domination, then in the name of globalization, all that we are doing, to what extent are we autonomous in doing so, or is the entire process what we call globalization is another name for Americanization of the societies all over the world. Now, this shift from, there is a very interesting, important shift in terms of philosophy, I must tell you. There is a very important shift. The Cold War politics days, the focus was on equality of states. So all states were equal. For instance, if you recall, non-interference in another country's affairs was considered to be an evil, something that should be discouraged. But today, equality is no more that important, because everybody thinks that USA is number one, therefore nobody is equal to USA. So equality is not important, and what has taken its place is freedom. And freedom now defined in a very important way. Namely, freedom is not freedom of that particular country, but freedom is freedom as defined in terms of absence of terrorism. And terrorism has been described, I mean, in terms of the article that I was referring to by the Secretary of State herself. Terrorism has been described in terms of all those philosophical abstractions, as she calls, our own cultural specificities. So, for instance, we say Asian values are different from the Western values. Well, that will not apply anymore. I mean, if you push this point to its logical conclusion, it would mean this: Asian values have no separate existence. Latin culture has no separate existence. They have all have to follow under this particular domain or imperium, namely that you have to make yourself free and democratic, so that ultimately world becomes free of terrorism. And then the peace will result. So this way of viewing peace resulting out of destroying these countries, sovereignty, at least the sovereignty of these countries, is a very unfortunate consequence. Probably we have to live with it unless we learn how strongly to oppose it. Because one important thing that is becoming clear is each culture and its independence, the autonomy of the culture of each country has no future now. Probably culture and peace are now not so much connected. Because culture has to be destroyed. I mean, your cultural, specific cultures have to be destroyed if there has to be peace. Now, in this context, one can probably argue what is wrong about the American stand if they are saying that the world should be made free of terrorism. well, one can say that there is nothing wrong really. But point is, till we reach that stage, till the present stage of its what is called hegemonic status, till it reaches this stage, what has been its record? Did it obey the global international regulations? Did it follow the positive lines of peacemaking and peace promotion? Unfortunately, because its records do not show that positive profile of having followed the promotion of peace lines as laid down by all countries together, at least in the UN Charter, enshrined in the UN Charter, therefore, there is always a fear that probably this profile which is emerging is more of dictatorial in nature, more of authoritarian in nature than democratic in nature. Though Madam Rice's article says that it is democratic peace, but this peace is not really going to be democratic. It is more authoritarian. It is a peace which is being inflicted on other countries to follow rather than asking them to participate in giving rise to global peace. So it's not based on sharing among the sovereign countries, it's based on dictation by one authoritarian country over the rest. And all these have been explained more by power than by reasoning, more by armaments than by peacekeeping efforts, rules and regulations. Now there have been several instances that one can, for instance, what sort of governments, when I refer to peacekeeping efforts, what sort of government have been promoted by this power which is now dictating terms of peace to the rest of the world. You see, Pinochet from Chile, Ziaul Haq from Pakistan, and similar other repressive regimes have been always propped up by America. It has, very interestingly, you will see that again the performance records are very dark. USA is the only country along with Somalia which has not signed the Convention on Child's Rights. It has withdrawn from UNESCO, its membership from UNESCO, and it did not sign, it opposed the International Criminal Court. Very interestingly, we have this famous, global phenomenon of worsening of the climate. The climate is changing very fast, becoming very hot and all that. There was a Kyoto Protocol which it also did not, it has not signed. So these are several instances where good things have not been done, or we did not have the response from this government, and therefore when it dictates the terms of peace, it becomes questionable for all dignified, all what you call this autonomous sovereign states like we people living in different parts of the world. Thank you very much for giving a passionate listening to sort of a monologue. Thank you.